Summer 2022 has finally arrived in its full force. Now, I was actually gone for last week, so thankfully I missed the heat wave. I heard that it's actually going to be getting really bad Saturday and especially Sunday. Saturday's getting into the mid-90s here in my location, which is a suburb of New York City. I heard that some places are forecasted to get to triple digits yet again. But the humidity is going to be low. The dew points are going to be in the mid-60s, so the heat index is only going to be into the upper 90s. And it'll feel more desert-like-ish. Sunday's only getting into the low 90s, but the humidity is going to make it feel like it's triple digits out there, so Sunday's going to be the worst. I heard that when I got back, the dew point was 67 degrees and the air temperature was 87 degrees. Heat index was 91. I heard that the dew point actually, I believe, dropped down to the mid to low 60s, which was the best we got in this heat wave. Although, while it's almost certainly going to be a 3 or 4 day heat wave, it actually wasn't the full week-long heat wave that we thought. Here's why. Typically, in order to be a heat wave, especially in the summer, you have to have 90-degree highs for 3 days in a row. And it can't be a real feel, it has to be the actual air temperature getting to 90 3 days in a row. This happened in New York City. This actually happened in New York City July 12th, 13th, 14th. And it happened there this time too, because they were not spared on Thursday, unlike us. I actually heard that at midnight, here the air temperature was 82 degrees, and at midnight in New York City it was actually 88 degrees. That sounds disgusting. That sounds horrible to me. But yeah, summer has truly arrived in its full fashion, and I want to describe how. Basically, we didn't really have any summer-like days leading into 2022. We actually were quite barren of those days in the beginning. Now, I don't want to say that the 82-degree day in March 2021 really felt like summer, because while 82 degrees is summer temperature, the low is 50 degrees. It was still 55 at noon. How at midnight it still held 58. The next midnight, that is. The night before it was 50. That's when the low temperature was. When it hit 82, the dew point dropped. The dew point really only managed to get into the mid-50s anyway, which doesn't really feel like summer. It did feel like a nice late spring day. Especially with the winds, it did not feel like summer. Arguably, it was May 18th when the low was 54 and the high was 80. Our next 80-degree day. But honestly, I want to say that it was on May 19th. And even in the low was 60 and the high was 85, there was little humidity. I mean, at that temperature, 85 will always feel like summer, unless there's like something that's going to make it not feel like summer, like there was on March 26th. So I just put it as May 19th, personally, in my opinion. This year, though, we didn't really have any of those days. I heard that in New York City, there was a day in April where it got to 85 degrees, and on that day here in the suburbs, it only got to 74. But believe me, I was not complaining at all about it. 85 degrees sounds disgusting. Anyway, so it really took a while. The way the temperatures were slowly beginning to build up, once you got to March, was a sign where we would have a last, and then the next impressive first wouldn't happen for quite some time after that, leading to some very bland temperatures in the process. So our first true summer-like day was May 21st. No day before it had managed to even hit into the 80s here in the city. Here, the highest temperature before that was 78, in the city was 79, but they occurred on 2 different days, May 18th here and April 14th in New York City. On this day, both here and in the city, the high hit 90 degrees. The low was 60 here in the suburbs and 62 out in the city. Despite this, the humidity rose substantially on the day. Dew points were in the low 70s. The feels like temperature managed to get into the mid 90s. It was honestly disgusting outside, and it came as completely unprepared because it was our warmest day by like a dozen degrees. May 22nd 22nd, the nighttime low in New York City was so high that it was the same as the average daily high of 72, and the high in the city was 89. Here we had a low of 65 and a high of 86. The real feel got into the low to mid 90s due to dew points that were again stuck in the mid 70s. However, here is why I don't want to say summer truly arrived. The day before, at least here in the suburbs, the low was 51 and the high was 69. Thunderstorms came through, and while they would normally cool us down, this time they packed a warm front with them. I remember walking and I was getting drenched, so I needed to stuff myself in a very uncomfortable sweatshirt for a hood on to protect myself from the rain, even though it was about 64 degrees when the front came through. And what happened on May 23rd was that there was another front leading to a low of 61 and a high of 75. Dew points dropping steadily from the mid 60s to like the mid 40s. Upper 40s, I think upper 60s, upper 40s. It was actually the day before all this insane heat came through. It got the dew point up to 49 here. When the air temperature at 51, it was very foggy. Honestly, it was not very pleasant. What happened was that on May 23rd, the high was 75. While that was one of our warmest days so far, that's truly spring-like and not summer-like weather, and cold fronts were coming through. The next day, the high of 69 and the low of 55 occurred at 11:59 p.m., more indicative that a front was coming through. And on May 25th, several places on Long Island got into the 40s, many of them for the last time of the year. Unfortunately, in suburbia, we only managed to get down to 50 degrees with a high of 66. The city had a low of 53 and a high of 70. Except for June 22nd, the last day of the year for the city, with a high in the 60s, was May 24th when they had a high of 67. So that's that. New York City, as a matter of fact, typically gets these milestones later than us. Earlier than us, so it depends. Like our first night in the 70s was much later than that in the city. The thing was, it was just these bland, boring temperatures, you know. We didn't really have that much summer-like weather. A lot of times there was a build-up, like at the end of May. So May 26th had a low of 51 and a high of 67, but it felt more summer-like as the humidity was building in the late afternoon. And also, it was bright and sunny, unlike the previous day. May 27th had a high of 75 and a low of 62 as humidity was building back. A lot of storms came through on the 28th, leading to a high of 74 and a low of 63. Made a mistake on my short sleeve shirt, then had to grab my fleece. May 29th, it got to 75 here and 77 in the city, and I know that because I went to the city. The low in both places was 59, which was the last time with a low in the 50s for 3 days. It was the first time that New York Metro Weather gave it immaculate reading since last November. Mainly because for once there was actually nothing wrong with it at all. They had given 9 out of 10s, but never a 10 out of 10 of the year before this. Their ratings are a bit skewed in my opinion. The humidity was low, and there was also that breeze. May 30th, though, was not a cakewalk. The low was 60 and the high was 82. Humidity was building throughout the day, although the dew points really, for the most part in the afternoon, only were in the mid-60s. I had to march in that, so that was true hell. That honestly felt summer-like. It was what you would call a mild summer day, but on Memorial Day, you don't want a mild summer day, especially when you have to spend 2 hours in a heavy uniform. That's like wearing a winter jacket and winter pants with a t-shirt and shorts underneath it. Oh, and believe me, taking off the uniform is not fun, but for the opposite reason. You get too cold from all that layering that you're used to, that you finally managed to adjust to being taken away from you. Yeah, wearing a t-shirt and shorts for the rest of the day might not be the smartest idea. I avoided doing that. I changed my shirt into something heavier. That was not a t-shirt. I'll let you figure out what that is. I don't want to sound weird, because that's why nobody watches these videos. So if you do, thank you. But May 31st, the high hit a searing 93 degrees. Due to the backdoor cold front, the low was 61 here and only 65 in the city. The morning low was actually in the low 70s, but the backdoor cold front is what canceled all of this. Um, it was searingly hot, and then the next day had a high of 72 and a low of 60 in the city. But in the suburbs, the low was 58 and the high was only 66 degrees. It was a complete opposite from yesterday. In case you're wondering when our last winter day was, probably sometime in April. Not really totally sure about it. Although May 7th kind of felt like winter with a high of 51 and a low of 45 and rain. And this can be what a warm winter day feels like. I think I did say that felt like winter. But then winter was completely erased. And 2 nights after that would actually be our last night in the 40s. At my house specifically, not what AccuWeather puts Plainview as, it probably did get down to 49 briefly. But I'm not totally sure about that. Anyway, so June. We had some humid days that had cooler readings in the mid-70s. I don't necessarily consider them summer-like days. Even a 75, 59, I wouldn't necessarily consider to be summer-like. And I've worn long sleeves through some of them, even though it feels like absolute hell when you do something, because they're not anticipated. Because that just feels like a warm but humid spring day. Spring can have humidity, and anything in the mid-70s can't really feel summer-like. I mean, I guess it could feel summer-like, but they personally don't. Like May 13th, where the dew point finally got into the mid-60s for the first time of the year, after it was stuck, but before that, I mean, the highest it got all year was 60 degrees, and now it managed to get to the mid-60s. The high was 76 and the low was 57. Or May 13th, when the high was 72 and the low was 59, but with similar humidity. That was, I believe, New York City's first night with a low in the 60s. Or when it was bright and sunny and still humid on May 14th with a low of 58, I want to say, and a high of 75. And then May 16th with a high of 71 and a low of 59. So hard to feel summer-like, but again, that humidity. I think May 16th was starting to feel spring-like again. I think. Yeah, it was. But when was our next summer-like day? Well, you kind of have like these cool, bright, sunny, low humidity summer days where the dew points actually dip down deep into the 40s on June 4th and 5th. But the bright sun made it certainly feel like it was still in the 90s, even though the high-low was 73.56 on a Saturday and 76.54 on a Sunday. It didn't really feel summer-like, though. It just felt like a very annoying and bright and sunny spring day. No, the next day that I really felt summer-like, I don't even want to say it was June 6th when the high was 78 and the low was 55, because again, low humidity mainly kept it feel still spring-like. And even though the humidity was building back into the 50s and into the 60s at night on June 7th, I don't want to say it was that day either. Mainly because on that day, what happened was that the high was 76 and the low was 58. It was cloudy and windy as hell. It felt super cold outside, especially for that kind of a temperature. Nobody was expecting that. Nobody. Everyone was cold. And that might have been throwing a rain threat on June 8th when the low was 67 and the high was 85. People actually really wear stuff they would never wear in 85-degree weather. The next day, the low was 66 and the high of 85. But even more people were wearing heavy clothing because, again, except this time it wasn't a rain threat. It was actually pouring rain in the morning. People wore stuff they would never wear in 85 degrees before. There were a lot of people wearing sweatshirts and pants when they would normally just wear a t-shirt and shorts in 85-degree weather. I was wearing a long t-shirt and pants. Normally I just wear a t-shirt and pants or sweatshirt and shorts. I don't know what I would wear in 85 degrees. It depends on what I was doing. But we get rewarded with more fall, spring-like weather on June 10th with a high of 80 and a low of 59. So that was nice. Then we get humidity and rain the next weekend. June 13th, we have a low of 67 and a high of 83. But the dew point managed to crest into the low 70s. And people were really wearing summer-like stuff. Plus, it was the last day of school when you exclude the finals. The next day, I believe it was less humid. Not what the humidity was, but there was a low of 66 and a high of 82. The next day, had a low of 65 and a high of 78. June 16th absolutely did not feel summer-like, with a low of 63 and a high of 71. It was even worse than June 12th, where people wore more heavy stuff. I guess it was supposed to be stuck in the 60s on that day. And while the low was 63 and met the mark, the high was 73. But June 17th absolutely was a summer-like day, with a low of 69 and a high of 91 degrees. The humidity was starting to break, but 91 degrees will feel like summer no matter what. But the next 6 days really felt spring-like. Lows were in the 50s on all these days, sometimes even getting quite deep in the 50s for this time of year. The highs were stuck in the 70s, except for one day where the high was actually in the 60s. I guess when the high was 79 and the low was 55, it felt like on June 20th, it felt like it's June 6th, round 2, because the humidity was low. The next day, the high was 79 and the low 59, and honestly, I wore a t-shirt and pants because of the high in the upper 70s, and I kind of regretted it. June 24th has a low of 60 and a high of 76, but it's kind of humid because it's at max humidity in the morning. The dew point, not max, but the dew point is 59 degrees. The last time of the year, we think that the air, until the fall, September, probably maybe August, the air temp hit the 50s was at 2 a.m. on June 23rd. The next 2 days felt like summer, with highs in the mid-80s and lows in the mid-60s and humidity coming back. Now here's why I say, though, summer hasn't truly arrived. The next day, the low of 68 and a high of 77. It was humid with dew points hovering around 70. Why is this not summer-like? Because it was raining. So it's hard to really feel the summer-like air when it's raining. And it was raining the whole day, which is not typical of summer. This is typical, again, of an annoying spring day, even though at this point it is summer. This is the last day I wore long season sweatpants of the year, except for July 15th, where I was taking a bus ride. That's why I wore it. And I thought Canada's Wonderland would be colder than it was, and I also get this decision because it actually was as cold as I thought. Wasn't expecting. It's confusing. Anyway, June 28th so far would be the last day of the year where the high temperature didn't hit 80 degrees. The high, I believe, was 79, with the low in the 60s. After that, every single day would hit the 80s, or even worse yet, into the 90s. July would have a few refreshing days, though. Like, for instance, July 1st felt summer-like, with a low of 68 and a high of 84, and rising humidity through the day, where it felt like it was 90. Wearing my heavy polyester Canada Day sweatshirt, even with shorts, felt so oppressive, but it was my Vancouver one. It had a Canada flag on it, and it was Canada Day. I was wearing it for a special occasion, you see. Oh, my back is killing me. My back is killing me. I was not on a good trip today for the past 4 nights. That's why I have been uploading. Anyway, the next day, the high of 86 and the low of 73. Me and my mom both wear t-shirt and pants on that day, which is a mistake because it feels like 94 degrees with the heat index, but it was supposed to rain and whatnot. And it was only supposed to get up to like 85 too. We got unlucky on both fronts, and this is why our grass looks it's so parched. On July 3rd, the humidity is dropping, but the high gets back up to 86, and the low is still 69 degrees. But Independence Day feels refreshing. It probably still felt summer-like, though it wasn't humid unlike Memorial Day, even though this day was slightly hotter. The low was 63 and the high was 83. July 11th would be the only other day of the month where the low gets this low, with a low of 63 and a high of 81. This is the coolest day of July with a mean temperature of 72 degrees. And it was one of our last like low humidities, at least I mean dew point in the 50s. But unfortunately, I was going away, though I would get some refreshing days on my trip. Actually, not really. And there was some summer-like days in between, but I was in Virginia Beach and not really following the weather that much. Now, I know July 12th had a high of 83, but the low at this point was in the upper 60s, like 69. July 11th will be the last day so far with a low in the teens in Celsius. The cutoff for that means 20 degrees Celsius is 68 degrees Fahrenheit. So every day would have a low either in the 70s or at 69 degrees exactly. The next day had a high of 89 and a low in somewhere in the low 70s. And the next day had a high of 90 and a low, I think actually at this point the low, well, one night I had a low of 74. I don't know which one it was. Wasn't really paying attention to the weather. The day we get back, it feels better with a high of like 84, 85, so 29 degrees Celsius, I'm pretty sure. And it actually gets cooler over the weekend, but more humidity as there's a big buildup of warmth. I heard in the city, it got down to 66. I think here in South it was 69. Both places had a high of 85 on Saturday, mainly because of the storm, so this low was in the afternoon. On July 16th, the heavy rain was very localized. July 17th, we had a high of like 82, I want to say. But at this point, the low was I think like 70 degrees. Monday I was leaving, but I heard the high was 81 and the low was 75. This is our warmest low so far. Tuesday would have a high of 92 and a low of 75, and Wednesday, from what I heard, had a high of a searing 96 degrees and a low of 75, even though the humidity was building. Thursday, the humidity was disgusting. New York City had their first dew point above 75 degrees that year. I think we might have too. Surprise, surprise. It only really got to like, I think it only got to 74, maybe it got higher on the July 18th storms. The city had a low of 69, again, due to the storms, whereas here the low again is 75. Both places had a high of 81. However, for New York City, this is important because this is the coolest day since June 28th. Again, due to the storms coming through. And I think Wednesday, I think the high was 95. I think the high was 95 and the low was 76. I think that's what I meant to say. Thursday, the low was 72 and the high was 89. The low only occurred during a round of storms, though. And it began to get really hot and humid again. I heard today the high got into the mid-90s. Honestly, right now it's probably in the low 80s, but I didn't check. But yeah, summer has arrived. We're going to be getting 2 to 3 more days with highs in the 90s. Our first official heat wave is on the way. This is what true summer can possess. There's a heat wave in Europe going on. It's killing over 4,200 people. This heat is widespread. I'll say this once and for all. This could be the coolest summer for the rest of your life. It probably won't be, but it could be. Summers will be getting hotter. And while there are trends, hotter summers are just becoming more of the norm these days. As well as more uneven temperatures in the spring. The fact that May 9th was our last officially recorded low in the 40s of the year should be a stark indicator of this. This could be one of our earliest days ever. This was the same case in New York City. Just the low in the city was 48 or 49 and here was 45. New York, while we had a low of 49 on October 1st, New York City's low was 51. The fact that their first day in the 40s was the second latest on record on October 18th should be another stark indicator of this. Now, I will say that the 2022 hurricane season will probably clock in at below average, which could be, again, a false flag that climate change isn't real. It is real, but the oceans haven't really been producing anything, and climate change is typically indicative of more active seasons. Our last time with a near average season was 2015, and below average was 2014. And we have had 2 extremely active seasons, 2017 and 2020. Now I know but 2019 and 2021 are more stormy than 2017, bull crap, but we use accumulated cyclone energy when determining extremely active seasons for some unknown reason. which makes 2017 more active than even 2020, which is supposedly the most active hurricane season of all time. But 2020 still had an ACE of around 180, so it did meet the criteria for accumulated cyclone energy. Fun fact, there was actually some storms in November that gave us that. I mean, to be honest, the 2021 Atlantic hurricane season was pretty much dead after October 5th, with only one storm after that date, Tropical Storm Wanda. And was the complete opposite of our last October, November, where 5 out of our 7 major hurricanes took place. Complete opposite of that. Our death toll was more than doubled in November alone, thanks to Hurricanes Eta and Iota, which combined caused over 250 people to lose their lives. And this year so far, we've been pretty much dead. We had Tropical Storm Alex in early June, Tropical Storm Bonnie and Cole in early July. We haven't even had a hurricane yet. In 2020, our first hurricane, to be fair, wasn't until July 25th. And the beginning of the season, while it was active, the storms couldn't really intensify. But this time, it can't really seem to get any at all. In 2021, our first hurricane was on July 2nd when Elsa intensified. We still haven't had a D storm yet, and it's July 22nd. And they're calling for an above average season, but I really don't think it's going to happen. Because every single time they say that, nothing ever happens. If I had to predict, I'd say we'd probably have 12 tropical storms, which would be near average, but that's really nothing for these days.